We have quorum. I'm calling this meeting to order. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome members of the committee and visiting members of council. Also, a warm welcome to members of the public and those watching live online or television. As usual, I would like to remind everyone that you can find the agenda for today's meeting and to follow the meeting in real time at www.toronto.ca/council. Do we have any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? None declared, so noted. A motion to confirm the minutes of April the 21st, 2015. Councilor Malo, all those in favor? Against? Carried. Thank you. On today's agenda, we have 4 items, and I just wanted to bring to your attention, members of council, item 1 and number 2 is referred to chapter 545. On item 1, we have the framework for the comprehensive review and some aspects of modernization. And on the second item, we have some amendments to the same chapter. So I would like to request if we can deal with those 2 items at once. They're very related. And then we can vote on those separately. Are we okay with that? Great. Thank you. So we'll go briefly through the agenda and the items. So item 1 and 2, I have a recommendation that I'd like to move, so I will hold those 2 items. Item 3, we have speakers, and we have the green sheet with public speakers. And item 4, we don't have any speakers. But I believe that we have, city staff, do we have presentation on item number 4? Yes, sir. Great. So item 4 will be held as well. Great. So we'll go to item 1, and that's the framework for the comprehensive review and modernization of Chapter 545, licensing. And as I requested, also we'll be dealing with the second item at the same time, amendments to the same chapter 545. Any questions to staff? Councilman Muliri.
Frameworks that we're going through, they govern pretty much most of what this committee is responsible for. Am I accurate with that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, certainly bylaw 545 is a substantive amount of business the committee deals with, but certainly is not all.
Do massage parlors fall into this category?
So every business that the municipality licenses is governed under this chapter, yes, sir.
So will we be looking at through this amending some of the difficulties that we're having with the illicit activities that seem to be taking place in these parlors?
So absolutely, through this review of 545, we are looking at article by article reviews, focusing first on those types of businesses where we've run into either challenges from an enforcement perspective or are very outdated and need to be updated. So that body of work will be coming to this committee at a later date in respect to illegal body rub parlors.
Do you anticipate that recommendations on zoning changes in the city to restrict these businesses in certain areas would be a part of this?
So we would bring the component of the bylaw dealing with the business licensing. Through the harmonized zoning bylaw, there is now a definition for body rub parlor in the harmonized zoning bylaw, speaking to those only being permitted in industrial zones, and otherwise they are not a permitted use.
What about the ones that are on main corridors?
So the challenge we're having with illegal body rub parlors are those types of premises operating with a holistics license.
Right.
It is a very focused piece of work that's being done right now with our bylaw enforcement team in cooperation with the Toronto Police Service. We are identifying opportunities to change our bylaw or have our bylaws amended to help our enforcement efforts. So that is what we will be bringing forward. And certainly, if there is anything from a zoning perspective that needs to be addressed at that time, we would take the appropriate
Would we
steps.
as a committee be able to restrict them on main arterial roads, close to churches, close to schools, that sort of thing?
So currently, the challenge is that those premises you're discussing that are operating as illegal body rub parlors but are licensed as a holistics operation are permitted. There have been some clarifying language put in the harmonized zoning bylaw to try to differentiate those. But certainly, body rub parlors as they are not permitted on major arterials. Those that exist are legal non-conforming. Any new additional true body rub parlors that are licensed as such can only be placed in industrial zones.
Well, holistics, however, are allowed on main arterial roads.
Right, so the zoning,
And there seems to be more of the illicit activities, even the time that they're allowed to be open. It's as simple as that. There seems to be more of those things going on in holistics than anywhere else.
yeah, so through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct, sir. The issue of illegal body rub parlors disguised or masked as a licensed holistic is a substantive problem in the city. We estimate we have over 400. That's why we've got some work underway and a concerted effort and are partnering with the Toronto Police Service to try to combat that.
Would you entertain a motion for me today to be extra diligent on holistics and a separate kind of recommendation that will help, I guess, deter any of the illicit activities that are going on in holistics? So we deal with holistics separately?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, absolutely. This is, as I mentioned, one of the more substantive problems we have that we're trying to combat, and any support for us doing so would be greatly appreciated.
Okay, so I guess I'll point to the clerk and ask for that. The other part of this that's a little confusing is the definitions of parking lots and all of that stuff, private lots, commercial lots.
Councilman Leary, we do have an item that is.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if it's number, what is it, 4?
That's-
Did I ask these questions on? Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, we have the Vice Chair, Councilor Karygiannis. You're next. I'm sorry, we have a visiting member council. Is with the indulgence of the committee, Councilor Anunciada, you're first. Please go ahead.
Tracy, as far as clothing boxes, drop boxes, so that's part of the,
Through you, Mr. Chair, Councilor Nunziata, clothing drop boxes are actually dealt with under its own separate specific bylaw. We do have the for-profit clothing drop box operators in 545. But I think the challenges you're having with clothing drop boxes is that related to the permits and the property standards issues.
so
It's a separate bylaw.
if we wanted to bring that report forward at the next committee, could we ask for a report back on that?
So through you, Mr. Chair, maybe it would be best if we have a conversation offline so I can understand what you're looking for. We currently do not have work started on reviewing the clothing drop box bylaw that was enacted, I think, in 2013.
Yeah.
But if you like, we can have a conversation, see what is the challenges you're having, see what would require any amendments to the bylaw,
Oh, I think
if
a lot
any,
of
and then we can bring that
amendments to the
forward,
bylaw.
so.
At one time, we discussed previous, when I was on the licensing previously, we talked about some of these cash places where they're cashing checks. There's so many of them everywhere now. They're just like nail salons. They're everywhere. But some of them are buying and selling gold, right? And at one time we were going to check in to report back if there was a license that was required for some of these check cashing places actually selling gold?
So through you, Mr. Chair, we've got two separate and distinct business operations, though it sounds like they're happening in the same place. We currently have regulation governing the old gold buyers. There were some questions asked in respect to regulation around the cash, the money mart or those types of cash
Yeah.
handling.
Yeah.
So they are separate. There is regulation elsewhere provincially on the cash handling side. The old gold and pawn shop piece is a part of 545, is a part of the review. So I think that would be the context we have that conversation in when we look at the old gold buyers. I'm not sure what our timeline is for that right now, but it is on our list of items to review in 545.
Okay, so you're reviewing that part of it?
Yeah.
Okay. And then as well, there was a request that was made, that I made the request a few years ago as well, as far as some of the businesses hanging up clothes on walls. And we were going to look at, as part of being this, part of that as being assigned by law. So what happened with that request on,
So through you, Mr. Chair.
you
I
have
think
so many
what-
places just hanging, putting nails in walls and.
Right.
And rope across trees and hanging up clothes, you know?
So that, to me, that falls more under the boulevard marketing or, those right-of-way encroachments. I don't know where we're at this point, if we've had any active investigation or work done on it. We certainly are working on harmonizing the Boulevard Cafe and marketing bylaws that we have. So I'll circle back and see if we've included those types of activities in that review.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you. And Councilor Nociara. Now we have the Vice Chair, Councilor Janis, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, Chair, to Executive Director, would you be able to walk us through what happens when a bylaw officer working with Toronto Police Services, when they were to visit one of these so-called quote-unquote holistic body rub parlors that are actually doing activities that are not conforming to the holistic activities, and how they, and what are the limitations that they have in order to lay a charge or not lay a charge, and what actions do they have to see take place in order for these things to lay charges, and what are the difficulties that they face?
So through you, Mr. Chair, any inspection of any licensed business requires, our review is to ensure that they are operating in compliance with the regulations that govern that particular business. So in the case of a holistic licensed premise, they have a set of regulation they have to adhere to. Some deal with the cleanliness and maintenance of the premise. Some deal with the articles of clothing being worn by service providers being appropriate. So our officers go in and determine whether the operator is operating in compliance with all of those various regulations that govern that type of operation. My officers do not get engaged in any kind of undercover capacity work to determine issues of morality, which are governed under the criminal code.
Through you, Chair, so we are limited in what kind of charges we can lay regarding the morality code. We don't actually lay any charges in the morality code.
So through you, Mr. Chair, our bylaw governs the municipal interests in around consumer protection, public safety. Morality matters are dealt with under the Criminal Code of Canada. What our officers will do is identify how a premise is operating, and let's just say any storefront that we find is operating a business that requires a license of a certain type. If they do not have that license, then we can charge them for operating without a license that is matched to the business they are undertaking, if you follow me. Right.
Through you, Chair, let me get clarification. So if a holistic parlor is carrying on a questionable activity, then you can lay a charge that they're not adhering to the rules of engagement, if I can put it.
No, I understand. So through you, Mr. Chair, if we undertake an inspection of a premise that has a holistics license, the expectation is they are operating as such and they are operating in compliance with the holistics regulation that govern them. If our investigation through various means, including inspection, identifies that that business is actually operating as something other than what it has a license for, then we can charge them for operating an unlicensed business of whatever type it is, and in this example, would be operating as an unlicensed body rub parlor.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and certainly I'm trying to pay attention. Unfortunately, we need to make sure that you do control the room. Do you also pass information of such nature to the police as well as to Revenue Canada regarding an operation that might be carrying on different stuff that it needs to, but you find out that they're carrying on improper activities and it might be questionable, and Revenue Canada might want to get information on that?
So through you, Mr. Chair, we do not engage directly with Revenue Canada in that respect. We do partner with the Toronto Police Service, and as is permitted under MFIPA, we can share information amongst law enforcement agencies for a law enforcement purpose. Till this time, we have not actively engaged Revenue Canada in these types of investigations or operations.
Through you, Chair, if I was to move a motion, and I certainly will ask for legal advice too, that we provide that information to Revenue Canada, would be that something that you might want to entertain?
Through you, Mr. Chair, certainly, Councillor Karygiannis, our challenge right now is dealing with the enforcement of the bylaw and the appropriate licensing regime that ought to be applying to these premises. That is the focus we have at this time. I would suggest that there's work that we need to do, and in partnership with the Toronto Police Service, and make sure that we have the appropriate evidence we need before we start engaging additional enforcement bodies.
Last question, Mr. Chair, if I may. Would you entertain, through you, Mr. Chair, would you undertake, looking at the report, how you engage Revenue Canada, and let them know if this is appropriate?
So, yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, certainly, Councillor, if you'd like us to have a look at the feasibility and appropriateness of us engaging Revenue Canada in some of our investigations, we can have a look at that. No problem.
Thank you, Councillor Karygiannis. Any other questions? If not, I do have a question. It's with regards to the framework. So the main purpose of the framework, I just want to have a good understanding in terms of where we are going with this, is to deal with some parts of the Chapter 545 that are old, antiquated, perhaps irrelevant to the licensing aspects, or they are overlapping with other jurisdictions, either at the provincial or federal levels. Is that what we're doing here?
Through and to you, Mr. Chair, absolutely. Chapter 545 is a very large bylaw with articles governing a multitude of businesses, many of which have not been undertaken through a review for many, many years. We are undertaking to look at the entirety of our approach to business licensing, how to appropriately regulate, and at the same time, ensure that we're doing just what is necessary for the municipality to effect its purpose. So this review is very welcomed. It will hopefully address the Franken bylaw issue that we've inherited and have been working with, and I think we're going to see some great progress coming out of this review.
And there is another aspect in terms of taking bold, innovative action in terms of modernizing the processes that we have in place. Now, I'm going to be tabling a motion or recommendation on this to ensure that as we move forward, that we use online services. So for business, for example, that they want to either renew the licenses or apply for a license, I don't see a reason personally like why people shouldn't do that online. And other divisions are doing it. For example, the Toronto Parking Authority, the Parking Division of the City of Toronto, they are doing it as well. So is that the intention also in terms of of the framework?
So through and to you, Mr. Chair, and certainly as part of the report 4.2 that's in front of you, this review of 545 as the governing regulation for businesses is a piece of the larger transformation initiative. MLNS has created an IT strategic plan. We've developed a business transformation plan to change how we approach business licensing. So those in partnership with the work that's going to come through this committee is going to enable the online functionality that we'd like to see, streamlining of processes for business license applicants, and lessen the drain on businesses trying to get going in the city where they require a municipal license. So it's to do all of that.
When do you anticipate that this could be done and available to the public in terms of that to be implemented, this new technology, to do it online?
So we have an aggressive 3-year plan, which is already in year 1. There is some online functionality right now with business license renewals, and we're still looking at enhancing what we have with our existing systems while we look at the go-forward solution. So that is a body of work that is ongoing. But it's going to take us through this year to go through business process reviews, and of course 545 is a key piece of what we required for another system to do, or the system we have to be expanded. So it's at least a year and a half plus away before we're there at minimum.
As we all know that there is a huge push from the administration in terms of modernizing the way we do businesses, would it be possible to do this by the end of 2016?
We certainly have that as a goal, to have further online functionality enabled and have business processes more efficient. That would be ideal for me, because I share that interest in ensuring we've got the most effective and efficient process. So we are targeting, I believe, in the framework, the end of 2016, to have a substantive amount of that work done. And we'd be happy to come back at that time, if we're not finished, to at least tell you where we're at. But I know we've targeted Q4 2016 to have it all done, and we're looking forward to the next year and a half of hard work.
Fantastic. Now, with regards to the next item, that's some amendments to Chapter 545. I understand that we have about 69 type of licenses and different categories as well. And you are proposing in this report some deletions and some changes to to Chapter 545. Can you just give us a quick brief in terms of how many licenses are being removed or how that's being categorized?
So to you, Mr. Chair, we've got 12 license classes that we're looking to eliminate, many of which are no longer required. The businesses that we had licenses for no longer operate. In addition, in this report, a number of definitions being updated to ensure that they accurately reflect the current state of our structure, but also what is applicable as far as changes that have happened through this committee in the past and cleaning that up. There's a couple of other items in this report that I think are really important to note. The first one being the updating of the language around the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. That's a nice piece of work that we've done, very timely in respect to some issues we've had recently with a couple of people being refused service with their service dogs. So there's an update in the 545 that applies to all licensed businesses in that regard, and I think that's a very appropriate or important measure to undertake. As well, what we're seeking is delegated authority to enable multi-store licensing and multi-year renewals of licenses, which will help some of those chain types of operations who so choose to bundle their licensing together. So and that certainly will add to efficiency for those, and that is something that's been requested by at least one large chain operator in the city. So getting rid of things that we don't need anymore, cleaning up definitions that don't apply anymore, and enabling some flexibility for multiple store and licenses and multi-year renewals, I think will be significant achievements this time.
Thank you so much. Great. So any speakers now on these two items? Visiting members of council? Councilor Nunziara? Okay. No, is Councilor Nunciara indicated that she would like to speak, but she would like to draft the motion at this point. So we didn't. Okay,
So let me give an attempt to even the clothing boxes. That the executive director of municipal, well, this is mine, and then I'll word Councilor Nunziata's pretty much the same way. That the executive director of municipal license standards be requested to report to the Licensing and Standards Committee on illegal holistic licensing activities and recommendations on how to enforce and regulate them through the zoning bylaw. The second one would be Councilor Nunziata's, if she's listening. Councilor Nunziata? This is your motion that I'm trying to help you with. That the executive director of municipal licensing standards be requested to report to the Licensing and Standards Committee on the growing number of clothing boxes on private property and on boulevard, city boulevard areas. And recommendations on how to enforce and regulate them through licensing and zoning bylaws.
Do we have it there? Yeah. Okay, if there is any amendment to it, I'll be more than glad to take care of that.
Give it a shot.
Okay, you have the floor.
So I just to speak on a matter, I'm glad we're doing this, Mr. Chairman. One of my biggest concerns, as you've known over the years, is the amounts of illicit activity that seems to be growing, that I can see anyway, through talking to 31 Division and staff on holistic centers that seem to be cropping up everywhere in our commercial properties. And we all know the activity that's going on there, and we choose to put our head in the sand and not recognize that in fact it's prostitution. And these places are being placed near schools, near churches, near areas that are trying to even revitalize in a business sense. And anybody with a right mind will know that you're not going to get a very legitimate corporation in a strip plaza if there's this kind of activity next door. So it hurts the economy in particular pockets in this city as well when these places do surface. Now, I'm not talking about the very legal, very professional places. I'm talking about the ones that have opened up specifically as brothels under the name Holistic. And we all know it exists. I believe that all you have to do is look at the flashing spa signs, the flashing holistic signs that are on windows and that sort of thing. And that's pretty much a very easy way to determine whether or not these places are worth looking at in an enforcement way. The other part to this equation is I'm not talking about those that are in hotels and those that are in physical fitness gyms, that sort of thing, because they, for the most part, are pretty legitimate. I'm talking specifically in neighborhoods, in strip plazas, on main streets that we know are issues. I've got one that I've been trying to fight for years, and we just keep giving them licenses because they keep changing their name every time they get charged and brought to court and get convicted. And the City of Toronto just gives them licenses back. I think the Act needs to change so that we have some more say in terms of not only who we give these licenses to, but how quick we give them the licenses and whether or not they've had history in the past doing the same sort of business. I think we should have more say around that. It's my understanding that we don't. I've got one, as I said, that has turned into a heroin den as well. So it gives you a sense of how illicit these places are becoming. So that's the purpose of my motion. I think we can probably do it through zoning by just simply saying these places, these holistic centers, should be either in hotels, they should be in the professional settings like physical fitness training centers, therapeutic centers, that sort of thing. And I think by doing that, that would be a natural deterrent in getting rid of them. And they shouldn't be put in our Main Street plazas in certain parts of the city. And until we realize that it's actually deterring business from setting up in our communities, we're not really going to do anything about this. And it's time that we do.
Thank you, Councilor Malidi. Any questions to the mover? I have a question, Councilor Malidi, in terms of your motion. And as you know that we've been dealing with this for some time already, and the big question is enforcement, and you have it that in your motion. Now, given the thousands and thousands of condominiums and probably, and at this point, I don't think that any one of us know how many and illegal holistics do we have across the city. What are your thoughts in terms of enforcement?
Well, I would imagine that the first thing staff will do is talk to every councillor. I think all of us know exactly where the illicit activity is taking place in our wards, and we're probably the first place that they probably want to come to. You can just base it on all my emails to staff as well in terms of where I think they are. And it's as little as illicit activity is as little as opening up at the wrong times. We're giving out all these licenses saying you can use this license, what is it, from 9 o'clock until in the morning until 9 p.m. But what's happening out there is they're using the license to be open from 9 p.m. until 9 in the morning. And all the illicit prostitution is going on at night, and everything else that's happening in those. So, Mr. Chairman, I just think that we made an attempt. I wish I was a part of the committee then, because I certainly wouldn't have just agreed that in the industrial areas we can license these places and just turn our head and say it doesn't exist. Let me just say this now very quickly in answering your question. Now's the time to do this. We're starting to hear exactly what I've been saying for years now. Women are being forced into this trade. And there are rooming houses, even in my ward, that I know are there, that we don't enforce, that have women that are being forced in and out of there to go to work and come back, and they shuttle them and then bring them back, and they're told to stay in their apartment and not get out, not leave until the next morning. So it goes well beyond what we're trying to do here. We're trying to protect the women that are forced into the trade and are forced into this country as well.
Thank you.
For those reasons.
Now, a further clarification on your motion is to enforce and regulate through the zoning bylaw. Now, in terms of enforcement, wouldn't you agree perhaps that we may need other enforcement entities to be part of it? For example, municipal licensing, Revenue Canada, public health, and whoever else, that to be part of the process.
I think the first thing we need to do is figure out how we can limit the number of licenses and where you limit them to. We're basically saying, here you go, you're holistic, we're going to just shut our eyes, our ears, and give you the license. I think if we start saying you're not allowed a holistic in certain parts of the city, and you are in others, like I said, hotels and true spas and that sort of thing, then I think you're indirectly enforcing the proper activity through those changes.
Thank you, Councilor Malidi. This is a request for a report that you're asking.
I know.
Okay, is Councilor Jennings?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask a question. Would you agree that, these holistic licenses I think there's 34 or 35 different individuals or people that are, or associations that are licensed, and there's a review going on, that we also may need to make sure that there's no illegal activity going on in those, I mean, those 35, there's a report that's been done, I believe by staff, that we got to look at them, the 35 entities that, 34 or 35 entities that we advise them, guide them, and say that there shouldn't be any illegal activities going on.
Well, I think, one thing I'm missing here, and I hope staff can probably do it on their own, is to get auditors to go into these establishments too. If we're handing out licenses, and we know that there are some things happening, I think that there's the resources to be able to go in there and find that out yourself. Auditors might be able to find that as well. Our auditors might be able to go into these places and quickly realize what's going on.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, we'll go Councilor Di Giorgio. Go.
I'd like to ask a question of staff, actually, about the
We went through that already. We are just.
No, I know. Oh, then put me down to speak. I have some concerns.
At this point, Councilman Moliri, he put a motion forward, and we are asking questions to the mover on his motion.
All right, maybe I'll ask it of Councillor Mammoliti then. Just some clarification.
Is Councilor Di Giorgio and
You just
Councilman Moliri,
throw the motion up there, please.
can we display?
There's something about illegal licensing activity going on that I just wanted some clarification on. I thought the motion spoke to illegal licensing going on, that's why I wanted to ask a question of staff, but I'll ask it of the councillor.
No, the intent is,
I know, but I'm
the
just,
intent is to hit every component that's illegal that we know about. And the police know what's going on. And our staff, as Ms. Cook has mentioned, are working with the police department, so they know exactly which ones are being watched and scrutinized and charged.
no, I understand
Those are the
that,
ones
but
that,
when it talks about illegal holistic licensing activities, what the implication is for me is that staff is neglecting to check the zoning before they hand the license out, or they're neglecting to check the definition of holistic to see whether in fact the activity is
Counselor,
going on.
Counselor,
You're not
you're a
neglecting anything.
counselor in the former suburbs of the city of Toronto. Every one of your strip plazas are zoned for these things. They can go in tomorrow with a license and start acting
I
out the way they
understand
are.
that. Do you understand that if in fact we were to change the zoning to control where they would be permitted, that the existing spots are legal nonconforming?
If we change the zoning, and I've always suggested this, you change the zoning to protect neighborhoods and get them out of neighborhoods. And
I
put the-
understand that, but what I want you to realize is that the existing situations or activities that you're hoping to get rid of would in fact be protected on a legal nonconforming basis. That's all I'm saying.
Well, let's just wait and see what the report brings back and then figure out how to deal with it. I mean, legal's already found an issue with my wording around rezoning. So I'm going to have to do it later when the report comes out and to prove that we can actually rezone to deal with this. I won't do it now. I'll wait for the report to come out.
Can't.
I think there is a minor, is part of the grammatical structure on the second last line, Councilor Mammoliti, that should be illegal licensing on holistic activities, just to change.
It's illegal activities, I think you're after, right?
Yeah,
So that minor change
That's
there.
where Councilor Mammoliti was going with them.
Yeah.
Or sorry, Councilor Di Giorgio.
Sorry, yeah, sorry, Councilor DeGiorgio, it's illegal activities.
yeah, that's what you want to implement.
Yeah.
Licensing.
There are many holistic license holders that are not illegal, or,
Correct.
Yeah, let's make that clear, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other speaker on this?
Just, I'm going to change the
Councilor Mallo.
motion.
I'm sorry?
I changed the motion to reflect this. I'll ask the clerk to do it.
Yeah, those changes are being made. Thank you. Councilor Malo, you're next. Please go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I really want to say that, well, I know that there are specific councillors with specific issues of import or interest to their communities, and they're raising those issues here today, and it's within their right to do so, of course. Some of these issues may already be well underway as far as a review by staff, and I believe that they are. What we're dealing with today is, I believe, an incredibly important initiative, and I want to thank both our staff and also our mayor for making this a priority, along with our chair. There's a lot of rhetoric around, remember the term customer service excellence. It was bandied about a lot. But meanwhile, the city wasn't as effective or efficient or streamlined as it should have been. And the work that's being done now by staff will be looking through a lot of, going through a lot of dust, going through a lot of archaic bylaws, going through a lot of rules and regulations that may not be necessary anymore, and looking for ways to make this city run better and more effectively and more efficiently and provide better service to people, including people who, invest everything into their small businesses and struggle every single day to make ends meet. And the last thing that they need is to have to climb mountains when there should be hills, to be able to run their businesses and have a good quality of life in the city of Toronto. So I simply wanted to just recognize what I really believe we're here to discuss and what we are voting on today, which is Mayor Tory's initiative, along with staff, with the support of council, I hope, to make the city run more effectively and efficiently and provide true customer service excellence to the people of Toronto and those who run businesses within our city.
Thank you, Councilor Malo. Any other speaker? Councilor Christianis, I think that I saw your hand. Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. I certainly support the stuff that's been going on here today, and I also have a motion that I'd like to put forth. If they can be flashed up on the screen by staff, I'll appreciate it. Checked with both legal and executive director, and I think this would be something that could be worked on, that staff undertake to bring back a report on how improper activities from holistic partners and other improper activities, i.e. illegal rooming houses and Uber, can be shared with Revenue Canada on a streamlined basis. What that means is that if we have activities that are illegal and people are certainly knowing to make money of this, that we advise Revenue Canada, and Revenue Canada, they can take the appropriate action in order to make sure that these people are charged and they pay the appropriate tax. And there's lifestyle audits of the individuals. There is, I'm infested with the illegal rooming houses, as well as I got some body rub parlors that exist. And a lot of these folks that are operating them are not paying the proper taxes. And I think that we need to make sure that Revenue Canada, as well as other agencies, are advised that of the individuals that are carrying on this, and they can take the appropriate action.
Thank you, Councilor Karygiannis. I believe that this motion is out of order, and that's going to be my ruling, and I'll be more than glad to give you the reasons why. And today we're not dealing with illegal rooming houses. There is a report that's coming to the June and committee meeting of the executive committee. And in terms of the Uber is not before us today. Now, you might want to do that via City Council through a notice of motion. And once again, it's not within the jurisdiction of this committee at the moment, as we're not dealing with those two items. So that's my ruling, that the motion is out of order. You can
If I was to remove those two
you
items-
can challenge my ruling.
No, sir, I'm not challenging you. I'm just asking a question.
There is no debate on this.
Can I ask a question?
There is no debate on that. It's just challenging the ruling.
Point of order.
Point of order, if I may. If I was to remove those two items that you mentioned, legal rooming house and Uber, will you rule that in order?
No, that should be the illegal rooming house and the Uber part. That should be okay.
Mr. Chairman, no
Okay.
point of order. Just, I'm wondering if the items that the Councillor Karygiannis is mentioning fall under Chapter 45
Is that a point
of
of
the
order, Councillor?
review. And the reason I'm saying it is if it's a part of 545 and they're reviewing anything that has anything to do with 545, including Uber and rooming houses, I'm wondering if your objection might be out of order itself.
Councilman Malidi, that it's very clear that we are not dealing with illegal rooming houses.
I know, but
We have gone
does that
through
fall
a very
under
lengthy
5?
process.
Do they fall
Allow
under
me just to explain
545?
that. It follows under 545, but
Staff said they don't.
we are dealing with the zoning aspect, and that's before the executive committee.
Okay.
For that reason alone, the motion is out of order.
Okay.
Chair, can I, sorry, if I was to remove those two items, then you can rule the motion in order, we can proceed with it?
Is if...
I mean, those
you
two items
review-
were, it's used as an example.
No, that has, okay, if you can review that motion and then we'll look into. Yeah, that will be in order. Now, with the permission of the committee, we have a visiting member of council, Councilor Luciana. She expressed her wish to speak, but she was working on a motion at that point. Yeah.
Actually, I'm not working on a motion, but with Councillor Mamlidi's motion, which he moved on my behalf, the clothing boxes, I've added the number of clothing drop boxes on private property in areas, because that's the big issue. So thank you to that for moving that motion, and the staff will report back on that. Just the other two items that I wanted to address, but I spoke to staff, I spoke to Tracy, and she said she's working on them, so she probably will be bringing a report back later, was the check cashing places, you know, where they're selling, and you have so many of them on a block in some areas, and they're selling gold at the same time, which is a problem, because in some of these areas where they're having problems and they're trying to revitalize the area, and you have a lot of break and enters. I remember when I got broken into 3 years ago, the police told me just go to the cash place down the street. They probably have your gold. So that's what they're doing. They're breaking into homes and selling them at the local, you know, check cashing places, because they're buying gold. So I wanted that to be reviewed as well, if they need to be licensed. And then also the hanging clothes, where in areas, my area, where they're nailing clothes on the wall and selling clothes, and no matter what you do, there's no bylaw, we can't enforce it, they can do whatever they want. So I want that looked into as well, because it really brings down an area in some areas where you're trying to improve the area, and you have some of these businesses that really don't care, and they're doing all these things. And unfortunately, there's nothing in the bylaw that prohibits them from doing it. So I just want the staff to look at if there's any way that we can regulate and we can enforce and bring forward a bylaw that would address some of these issues. So that was my issues, and so I don't need to move a motion, because Councillor Mamlidi has moved the clothing box motion on my behalf. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Luciana. Is Councilor Campbell? Are you okay? That's great. Is Councilor Janis?
Chair, under your advice and working with staff, I've changed my motion, if you will allow me to move forward at this point.
Can we have a display, please?
That staff undertake to bring back a report on how improper activities from holistic parlors and other improper activities can be shared with Revenue Canada on a streamlined basis. I mean, that pretty well...
That's in order. That's in order.
It's in order?
Yeah,
Thank
it is. Thank you. Any other speakers? Is, yes, Councilor Campbell.
Thank you. A question to the mover of the last motion. How is staff to define what is or is not improper?
Well, if you have an activity that's been carried on and staff, I mean, you know, they went into very detailed accounting if what is improper and how charges can be laid in holistic parlors. If they determine that a holistic parlor is carrying on illegal and improper activities, then they can report this to Revenue Canada or look at how we can report on a streamlined basis, because Revenue Canada is the only one that can really bring the hammer down. And if you do remember, Councillor, I mean, the biggest gangster in the world was Al Capone, and the way they got him was through evasion of taxes.
So I'll just repeat the question. How is staff to define what is or is not improper?
That's up to them, but I mean, if you see that something is carried on in a holistic body part which is not proper, then of course to determine it and to report it.
So you haven't really answered the question. So I don't know how staff is to define what is or is not improper. It strikes me that that would be a matter for the police to determine what is or is not illegal. Improper is a wide-ranging, ambiguous adjective that doesn't really define what may or may not be going on in such a.
Perhaps, I mean,
In talking to staff, they were comfortable as well as to legal with this motion, so I want to thank you for your intervention.
Councilor Campbell, on this one, perhaps is because they're asking for a report, so I'm sure that city staff, they will do due diligence in discussing with other stakeholders as well.
Okay.
So we'll be able to get to that. Any other speakers?
Just a question of Councilor
Question to the
Martinez.
mover, okay? Please go ahead.
On this improper activities question, it would be a judgment call by our staff as to whether or not they can, in fact, do something on their judgment when it comes to improper activities. It would be up to them, our
It will
staff.
be up to them, but I'm sure that staff, as well as inspectors, will have a good sense of what is legal and what is illegal and what is improper and what is proper, and certainly they will.
So in other words, an establishment that opens from 9 p.m. to 9 a.m., completely ignoring the bylaws that allow them from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., would be an improper use.
Could be an improper use, but I mean, I would say to use an establishment that says we're a holistic parlor, and you go in and you see females been dressed inappropriately, as well as improper activities carrying on. That's where the money that is questionable is in.
And improper use, if staff were to confirm with the police department, for instance, that a place that has a holistic license, but has a heroin den where people can sleep off their hit for the day, that would be considered inappropriate use
This is.
or improper use.
This is the gist of the motion. This is where we need to go after the individuals that are using, they're using the premises that have proper licenses, and they're using them inappropriately in order to gain extra cash. And I'm sorry, surely that the person that is hit on heroin and he wants to sleep it off when he goes in, services will not be rendered on the holistic approach, but they will charge him for everything else, or something else. And they more than likely will not be reporting that income.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? If not, I will speak. I'm going to move the following motion, that the Executive Director of Municipal Licensing Standards be requested to report to the Licensing Standards Committee by the end of 2016 on the division's progress towards implementing its strategy to introduce online service for clients as part of the divisional business transformation project. Members of the committee and members of council, at the beginning of this term, this committee identified the need to modernize the licensing by law, and that was very clear in terms of improving the ability of providing more efficient service to consumers. And our main responsibility as members of the committee is to ensure that the business licensing and permitting issuance are undertaken by focusing on consumer protection, health and safety, and also a regulatory process or processes that are comprehensive and modernized. That's the key. Now, this is the first part of the four-part review that we have on both. That's the framework review as well as the amendments of Chapter 545. And this is a good start. However, the bylaw has to be reviewed clause by clause, and each requirement and type of business licenses must be justified as why is there. If those reasons are still relevant and sensible to what we're trying to do in terms of providing the kind of service to our business overall. So it's important to do this, and to do that, of course, we have to take bold and innovative action to address those critical challenges that our city is facing. And let's be real that in terms of making our city more livable, functional, affordable, we have to do, and to help business overall, we have to eliminate unnecessary regulations and the bureaucratic red tape, because that's one of the main complaints that we are getting all throughout the city of Toronto. So is the nature of my motion overall, as it relates to the Chapter 545 and its regulatory regime, is that the regime itself is not flexible enough. It doesn't allow access to use technologies, existing technologies, that either, as I mentioned before, either to apply for and or to ask for a renewal, and that should be done online. Why should people take a day off or days off to file an application when this can be done online, as other jurisdictions are doing all throughout the world? So in essence, the bylaw should be reviewed, once again, clause by clause, and each requirement and type of the business license must be justified as why it should be there. If those reasons cannot be justified and they are not relevant and sensible, and then I believe that we have a problem. So I'm very confident on our city staff, and I want to thank them for the good work on both reports. In terms of the framework, I think that the goals are very comprehensive, and also in terms of the amendments to the Chapter 545, by reducing 12 categories, that's huge. That's a good start, and I want to thank city staff for that. And so that's my motion, and hopefully I can count on your support. Thank you. So now we have, we'll be voting separately on both, on the disposition of both items. And on the first item, we have some motions. And do we have any amendments there? Yeah, we're dealing with number 1 first. So we have Councilor Mamoulides' motion. Okay. All those in favor? Against? Carry. The next motion. And this is on, from Councilor Mamoulides on behalf of Councilor Nociara, as it relates to clothing of Dropbox and so on. All those in favor? Against? Carry. And here we have another motion, and that's number 3 from the Vice Chair, Councilor Karygiannis. So that's asking for a report. All those in favor? Against? Carry. And we have one more motion. And that's before you. All those in favor? Against? Carry. On the item as amended, and I would like for a recording vote on this one. Okay, so the suggested disposition on this item is to receive this report for information, as this is the first phase of the multiple phasing that's coming. So all those in favor? Against? Carry. Thank you. To the staff report. That's correct. Is no,
There is no amendment. What he was moving was an amendment of a staff motion, but there was no staff motion. The motion was to receive the report.
Through the chair, the motion to receive the report is redundant because the amendments carried.
Just to clarify, because I don't want us to accidentally erase our motions, the last motion that we just voted on was to what? Was redundant, so we shouldn't have done it.
Through the chair, the committee to, the motion to receive the report, the staff report is
not-
redundant.
Okay,
Let's forget it.
so that's fine. Right, but all of our other motions,
all the other motions, yeah,
and will be sent to council.
absolutely. Great. Thank you, Councilor De Vermeerke. You're very thoughtful and very practical. Thank you. So now we are on the next item that we already went through as well, and the suggested disposition on this item is to adopt the staff recommendations. All those in favor? Against? Carry. Great. So both items will go to City Council. Now we'll move to the next item. That's item number 3, and that's options for mitigating human-wildlife conflict in Toronto. And we have deputants on this item. So the first deputant that we have is Natalie Carboning from Toronto Wildlife Center, followed by Liz White, the Director of Animal Alliance of Canada. Good morning. Good to have you here. Thank you for coming. Please go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you for allowing me to come and speak with you today. I'll quickly go through my presentation. So my name is Natalie. I'm the Executive Director of Toronto Wildlife Center. I just wanted to commend the staff on the report. I thought the report was very, very good. I also thought that the recommendation that public education and changing human behavior as some of the primary recommendations are very, very important. I do have a number of comments about the report, but they're in the handout that I gave you. Basically, my fundamental comment is that there's a lot of wildlife in Toronto beyond the 5 species mentioned in the report. Over 300 species of wildlife live in the city of Toronto, so there's a huge diversity of wildlife issues, including conflict issues, beyond those in the report. Certainly, we're all familiar with raccoons and addax, but there are a lot of other species that people come into conflict with on a daily basis, including a lot of birds. There's even situations like garter snakes where it's just plain old fear of the animals. The animals actually aren't doing anything, but there are a number of situations where people just need that kind of information on how to deal with animals in their neighborhoods. And people can be very emotional when they find injured wildlife too, which I would argue is another type of conflict situation. Certainly people are finding injured wildlife every single day in the city of Toronto and can be very emotional and need help with those issues as well. You already have the biggest wildlife center in this country focused on urban wildlife issues here within the City of Toronto limits. Our wildlife hotline is considered the gold standard for hotlines in North America and is a very strong resource for preventative education for wildlife issues. We actually wrote the manual on wildlife hotlines, a hotline designed to educate the educators. It is the only resource in North America, and it's being purchased all over the continent and even in other countries around the world. We are also a strong resource for the community for rescues that the city is not able to carry out difficult rescue situations. And we're also the only resource in the City of Toronto for rehabilitating injured animals and dealing with orphaned wild animals as well. Situations that the public, again, can be very emotional about and is another result of conflict between wildlife and people. We do a lot of education in other ways too. We have several websites with an enormous amount of information. We have literature that we're producing as resources permit. We do a lot of work with the media, teaching members of the public about wildlife issues through the media. Of course, we do all the regular stuff like presentations to school groups and electronic newsletters, a lot of social media reaches to teach the public about wildlife issues. In fact, one story last month on an owl situation reached over 130,000 people through a Facebook post. The city asks us to do quite a bit with regards to wildlife situations. You refer a lot of callers to our hotline. You do request assistance with difficult wildlife rescues. You transfer animals to us as well, to our hospital, and then you do request help with community education initiatives. This is one situation that you did refer to us. It's raccoon on the Gardiner Expressway, where our rescue staff actually went out and quickly and safely got the raccoon out of that situation. You also referred this call to us and asking for help with the collared coyote in Scarborough. If you remember hearing about that guy, it was a lot of work over several weeks, but we did actually manage to get that coyote captured. Even your website, the City of Toronto, actually refers callers to Toronto Wildlife Centre's hotline. Our request to you today is to, in conjunction with moving forward on delivering wildlife services to the public, is to consider funding for Toronto Wildlife Centre for our operations. We have been approaching the city for many, many years for funding for just the type of thing that's being recommended in the report today. We already have actually agreements with the City of Markham and King Township for providing wildlife services in those municipalities, and the Town of Richmond Hill has just issued an RFP for wildlife services as well. Residents of Toronto definitely need help with wildlife issues, and we are definitely an organization who is focused on just that. Our request is to consider $750,000 in funding for operating costs to support Toronto Wildlife Centre's work in the community. In addition, our current facilities in Downsview Park have now been slated for demolition, so we have another problem. We actually are now working on creating a permanent home for Toronto Wildlife Centre in the Rouge Park. The vision for this home is to certainly do more to help with wildlife in the community, but to also provide a centre of excellence for teaching and training about wildlife issues, professional training as well as training for members of the public, and working with other organizations who have a shared educational mandate as well. Our current partners are Toronto Region Conservation Authority, Parks Canada, and over 30 companies are donating professional services so far. Our request to you today is to consider $6 million in capital funds towards this project, and that Toronto Wildlife Centre would raise the balance of those funds. In summary, we have been serving the public in the community for over 22 years now, and we have saved the city millions and millions of dollars in funding. If we weren't here, you would have had to do a lot more work. We are very financially strapped and exhausted in trying to meet the demands of an ever-growing city and its wildlife needs. And we hope that by partnering with the City of Toronto, we can not only assure the future of Toronto Wildlife Centre, but provide more services for the residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for the Deputant, Councillor Di-Vermeek. And visiting members of Council first? If not, okay, Councillor Di-Vermeek, you are next.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for coming today. And I think I had the honor 20 or so years ago of meeting Natalie and her Wildlife Centre. I'll call it in its infancy. So congratulations on providing a free service to the City of Toronto for over 2 decades. It's very much appreciated. How many calls would you say your wildlife hotline gets per year, roughly?
We handle roughly 30,000 calls a year right now, and that's actually not meeting the community need, though, at all. That's all we can handle with our current resources. So
if we waved a magic wand and said you had resources to fund your call center, do you have would they double? Would they go to 30,000 calls a year, to 40,000 calls, or?
My guess would be it would probably double. At this time of the year, for example, in May and June, we're actually not able to respond to conflict calls within the City of Toronto because we're handling so many emergency calls. We're getting up to 200 calls a day right now. We are handling conflict calls for Markham and King Township because we do have service agreements with them. And then we'll go back to doing our best to handle the conflict calls from Toronto starting in July again.
So if our goal as a city, as a report suggests, is to minimize conflicts between people and wildlife, because we have both people and wildlife living here, helping you would be a good way to help ourselves and our residents.
I would certainly say that, yes. I mean, it is something that our staff are very specialized in, and we train them intensively on the Wildlife Hotline to provide that kind of education.
And you mentioned, through you, Mr. Chair, that, did you say you have agreements with who?
City of Markham and King Township we have agreements with, and Richmond Hill just issued an RFP for wildlife services, to which we're responding as well.
Sorry, Markham, King Township, and
Richmond Hill
Is
has
in
an
an RFP
right
stage.
now. Yep.
so they've all sort of acknowledged that they need help with wildlife, because their animal services, like ours, probably deals mostly with cats and dogs.
That's right. Their animal services providers were primarily dealing with domestic animals, and that they were hearing from their residents that they needed additional help with wildlife.
And do you have expertise and authorizations that our staff don't have?
Well, we have permits from the provincial and federal government, but we do wildlife rehabilitation, which the City of Toronto doesn't do. And then most of our rescue program are field responses that the city staff is not able to do. It's things like going up into trees and going out into water, going out into ice, things like that.
And so do you have actual agreements with the City of Markham and Township of King?
Yes.
And Township? And you'd be able to show those or share those with our staff?
Yes,
Okay, so they hire you, if you will, as a service provider?
that's right.
Do they give you a grant, or is it a contractual, like the RFP? You bid and you maybe get a contract?
It's a service agreement, yeah.
Okay, and of those, say, 30,000 calls or the animals that the wildlife that you treat, what percentage are you think are south of Steeles Avenue versus the 905 belt, roughly?
Well over 70% are City of Toronto.
So if you closed your doors next year because you couldn't continue to pay your bills, or Downsview Park terminated your lease because I know they're building something new there, and you were homeless, what do you think would happen to our animal services department? Could we take?
Well, I think
How many animals do you treat a year?
about 5,000.
So do you think our staff would be able to handle those 5,000 animals per year?
Well, I actually know some animal services officers fairly well, and I know how busy they already are. So I think that certainly the residents would look to Toronto Animal Services for that help, but I think I would imagine it would be hard to take on that additional work.
Right, and as somebody who loves animal services, you're aware that we really do cats and dogs and rabbits, some pocket pets.
Yes, yeah, and Toronto Animal Services is great. We work with them all the time, and the response is wonderful for residents.
And do we call you for help sometimes, or do the police call you? Who actually calls you? Is it just the public?
Everybody calls us. Yes, city staff call us as well. Councillors' offices, I know that Councillor Mamalides' office has called us a number of times, for example. The police call us regularly.
And I know, I believe it was 2004 when I was in actually this room with you, asking the Budget Committee under David Miller if they would help provide support for the Toronto Wildlife Centre. From a financial perspective, we maybe get to in-kind in a minute, but from a financial perspective, has the City of Toronto in the last decade provided any financial support to the Wildlife Centre?
No, there's been no financial support.
Okay, in terms of in-kind contributions, do our vets come to your place to help injured animals or things like that?
No, we have our own staff vets and volunteer vets.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councilor Mamalidi?
Thank you for coming down, and thanks for your advice and help over the years as well.
You're welcome.
One of the things that I have recognized is in terms of services, there aren't many services that I guess our constituents might be looking for when it comes to raccoons and addicts, stray raccoons that make their way into homes, even stray cats that seem to be in neighborhoods and that sort of thing. You've given me some good advice in terms of how to take care of that issue. Do you feel like you could use a little help financially
Yeah.
to really get to some of the neighborhood issues?
Absolutely. We're so overextended right now. I mean, this time of the year, our staff and volunteers are there pretty much till midnight, 7 days a week, and still not meeting the community need. And the thing about wildlife issues is that it's not just animal lovers who have wildlife issues. Anybody can have either a conflict situation if an unwanted guest moves into your home or your shed. You can be sitting peacefully in your living room and a hawk slams into your window. All of a sudden, your child can bring something home from school. So it's something that surprises people, and they don't necessarily think about it until it happens to them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, I have a question. And in terms of the explosion of raccoons especially some parts of the city that has become a huge problem. What kind of assistance could you provide, perhaps, especially when there is an injured animal that's being run over? And is there any provisions that to assist in?
Well, I would be very interested to know what the population numbers, first of all, were for raccoons because of the distemper epidemic that's been killing them for over 10 years now. I actually wouldn't be surprised if their numbers are going down, just as an aside. But I mean, certainly we talk to people a lot about conflict situations on the phone with raccoons, so we can walk people through what they can do on their own, say if they've got a raccoon in their attic or their shed. I love the recommendation in the staff report about focusing on the feeding of wildlife. I think that's a really important component, and it certainly directly impacts the population of raccoons in the City of Toronto is the food availability, whether it be people intentionally feeding them, accidentally feeding them through maybe leaving food out for their cat in the backyard, or even in neighborhoods where there's just literally overflowing dumpsters everywhere with food, you know, behind all the little, you know, green grocers and things like that on many strips. There's an abundance of food that's available for raccoons. And their population directly reflects that. So I would imagine a multifaceted approach, trying to deal on the bigger picture issue, the population and the food resources, and then we can deal with people one-on-one, helping them with individual problems.
Thank you. Thanks so much for your presentation.
You're welcome.
We have the next speaker, Liz White, Director of the Animal Alliance of Canada. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for coming down. Great to have you here.
Thank you very much.
Please go ahead.
I'll be very brief. I'm here actually to thank staff for a really excellent report, and to seek just one additional amendment. Urge you to support the amendments that are in the staff report. Add an additional amendment that the city consider consulting outside organizations and individuals who are expert at non-lethal conflict resolution strategies in developing strategies for the City of Toronto. Our organization, I myself, along with Mary Lou, sit on a Human Wildlife Conflict Advisory Group to the Ministry of Natural Resources. I participate in a conflict resolution situation in the Kootenays, East Kootenays and British Columbia, and have been involved in this issue for quite a long period of time. So I think we have considerable resources to actually offer to the city. So I urge you to take us up on that offer, and we'd be happy to help. We've produced a habitat modification manual that mitigates conflicts with Canada geese. That's been widely used for the last 15 years in many, many municipalities and communities that I've talked to that have used it have found it very, very helpful. We're just in the process of finishing a beaver mitigation manual. In many municipalities, beaver are simply trapped as opposed to being dealt with in other ways with flow devices, et cetera. And we're currently doing a coyote manual. So all of those can be available to the city. And that's it. I'd just like to say thank you because the report is really excellent. I think Natalie's right in the sense that there are not a lot of bird issues dealt with there, pigeons, Canada geese, because there are conflicts, but often those conflicts tend to be episodic. And so maybe some of these others are more ongoing.
Thank you, Ms. White, for your excellent presentation. Any questions? Councilor de Bermejo.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for coming in today and all the great work that you do. It seems the title of this report is Options for Mitigating Human-Wildlife Conflict. And it seems pretty strong in our staff report, which I think is very thorough, that prevention is better than cure. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. But I think the issue is this, that where you can prevent it, that is absolutely imperative. But there will be conflicts. And so I think in those situations, we need to figure out how to mitigate those in a non-lethal manner.
And through you, Mr. Chair, I'll use raccoons as an example. Some people think if a raccoon gets in your roof, you have to kill it. And would you agree that that conflict actually could be resolved much more peacefully by having a one-way door? So if they called you, or they called the Toronto Wildlife Centre, or they called our animal services, you can say, put a one-way door on your shed or your garage or your attic, and the raccoon will go out and won't be able to get back in, you'll be happy, and the raccoon will go find a tree to nest in.
Yes, I think that speaks exactly to the best practices that the city staff were talking about. There are many organizations and individuals and companies who are expert in the area of wildlife removal, and it's new now because most wildlife removal companies never even handle the animals. It's just an exclusion thing. The only caveat I would say to that is just for individuals to be careful that they don't exclude mother raccoons when there are babies in the attic, that they just need to be cautious of that.
And would you agree that a lot of minimizing conflict or eliminating conflict is really just a conversation on the telephone to say, yes, you saw a fox in your backyard and you're frightened that the fox might steal your baby or bite your children or go for your throat when you walk out to your car, but after a 20-minute conversation, you can turn those people around to say, actually, the fox is sort of cute, and I do like the fox, and now that I know he won't bite me or he doesn't have rabies, the conflict is gone just by a conversation sometimes.
Yeah, I think in many cases, the conflict's gone as a result of just straight education and talk. A lot of people call us and say, I saw this animal out during the day, it must have rabies. That's a common misunderstanding. Most animals in the city of Toronto, other than bats, don't have rabies, that the four-legged mammals that used to have rabies don't have rabies anymore. And so a conversation simply allows people to be more relaxed and have a better understanding of what the animal's doing there. We also suggest that they actually take a close look at their home and make sure that there's no attractants that would bring that animal into their backyard.
And through you, Mr. Chair, that's my next question. Would you agree that in general, most human-wildlife conflicts occur when somebody like me, who loves birds, puts out 5 bird feeders in my backyard, which is a great source of food for skunks and raccoons and coyotes and mice and rats, because I'm giving them a free buffet at the De Bearmaker residence.
Right.
And then I look out my window and I don't see a little bird, I see a mouse or a rat or a skunk, and now I'm in conflict.
Right.
And is it sometimes your advice to me to say, Glenn, we know you love the birds, but just take down your bird feeders for a few weeks, or do this change or that change, and hopefully the skunk or the rats will go away?
Yeah, we try, for people who want to have bird feeders, and this is a big controversial issue, we've been down this road many times, but birds don't really need feed in the summertime. It might be better in the wintertime. But the key to it is to keep your yard clean. If you have bird seed, you have to clean that up so that you don't attract unwanted animals into your backyard other than the birds.
Right, and again, through you, Mr. Chair, again, as a fellow nature lover, I am my own 311 for wildlife conflicts in my ward. So when one of my residents calls me very upset that there's a snake in their backyard and they're just freaking out and think that the best way to deal with that conflict is to grab a shovel and pound the snake.
Right.
Is it your experience that you can resolve that conflict usually again over the phone by telling people the snake doesn't want to bite you, that little garter snake is there because it's sunny or it's warm, or you've got a big pile of rocks and a wheelbarrow that it's hiding under, and if you don't want the snake, you can take steps 1, 2, and 3, but don't hit the snake, and most people will listen to you and say, okay, you know what, I've got the shovel in my hand, but maybe I'll just hold on and let him slither through the fence and go out to the railway tracks. Do you find most times you can, if you will, talk people down from escalating a conflict?
Most people you can calm down. It's interesting because I garden, and I turned over a plant to put it in the garden yesterday, and a little brown snake dropped out. And so I could see why most people would be afraid, right, would want to in some way deal with that animal negatively, but we just allowed it to go away and didn't bother anybody. And I think talking to people about how unthreatening those animals are helps people put perspective in the situation.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. White. Thanks so much for your presentation. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak on this item? If not, questions to staff? No questions to staff. Speakers?
No.
Is Councilor Mamoliri, followed by Councilor De Bearmaker. Councilor Mamoliri.
Councilor De Bearmaker is going to move a motion that I'm going to be supporting, and I'll tell you ahead of time, because it does have a component of recommendations that may come later in 2016 in terms of reality, and that's to help fund an organization like this. And I do this because I've worked with this organization in the past, and they've helped me. I must tell you, they've helped me and my constituents more than you can ever imagine, just by teaching, I think, some of my constituents about everyone coming from the same page in terms of getting rid of their problems and at the same time not killing animals. And so I have full trust in the organization, and that's one of the reasons I'm going to support the motions. There are some parts to this equation, though, that I have issues with. And I'll be honest with you, some of those issues I have with my own constituents who have bought houses right in the backyard is a ravine. The Humber River, Black Creek, you name it. And you buy your house, right next to a ravine because it's, one, you don't have a neighbor behind you. You probably have 10,000 neighbors behind you in the way of animals. But so you've got the tranquility of a forest kind of setting, perhaps, water, all of the things that make people have a great barbecue in the back. But at the same time, the biggest complaints that come out of my neighborhood along those ravine lots are from the people that bought beside those ravines, and they're all the complaints about the animals that they're seeing. Well, I saw a number of snakes. The grass is too tall in the ravine. You need to cut it. I saw a fox. I have a child in my backyard. I've seen a coyote. That kind of thing. What do I do about it? Councillor Mamalita, to get down here and get rid of them. Yourself, right? I have raccoons that come and they destroy my backyard and they get into the house and that sort of thing. I think it's to be expected if you buy a house that you're going to see and encounter some of these animals. There have been some other problems. I've had neighborhoods that have had rats, and I think Ms. Cook knows about this because she came out to one of my neighborhoods, and we really haven't resolved that issue at all. Those rats still exist, and that's a health issue. So I've got some real issues about how we deal with rats and mice and that sort of thing, because there are health issues there. I'm not sure I'd want to save their lives. I think that my constituents would want to get rid of them as quick as they see them, and quite frankly, so do I, because there are other parts of this that are a problem. What I find interesting here is that if you look at the polling that was done on I guess it would be, it doesn't have any pages on here, but there seems to be 3 polling pages. One question was asked, is encountering wildlife in the city. The other one was encountering wildlife at home or property, which seems to be the highest percentage. The lowest seems to be encountering wildlife in parks and natural areas. So there are people that don't see as many animals in parks and natural areas, but they do see them in home or in property. That to me raises a bit of a red flag. There's something going on that we probably need to help them with, and there are probably reasons for that. I would guess that garbage and all the things that Councillor de Beermaker has mentioned is probably a few of them. But at the end of the day, we're here to help our constituents understand and take care of the problem. And the way this thing exists today, I don't think we're taking care of the problem. If you're an animal lover and you do not want to see those animals killed by anybody, I don't think we resolve that problem. If you're a homeowner and you don't want to see these animals in your attic or anywhere else, I don't think we resolve that problem. I think everybody's kind of frustrated. And I just think this approach might help everybody in the long run without killing animals, except rats and mice. I don't like them. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to move 3 motions. And I guess maybe my first one about the trying to reduce wildlife conflict with through the budget process is a long motion because I talked to 5 or 6 different people and every person added on a different clause to make it, I'll quote, a better motion. So the first motion just asked our staff, I'll call them collectively, all of them, including the CFO, be requested to develop or identify a funding source and bring forward for consideration as part of the 2016 budget process, an option to include operating funding for the Toronto Wildlife Centre that would help the centre meet our shared goals of minimizing human-wildlife conflict, educating the public about wildlife issues, and caring for injured and orphaned wildlife. The second motion is that the staff report back to us at our June meeting, because I think we only have meetings in June and then September, on the province's response to the City of Toronto's request for provincial action on licensing of wildlife operators. We put this request to them last year, and like many of our requests, I'm afraid the province will say to us 1 year later, nothing. So, and if it's nothing, then I think we're going to need to take action, because if you want to reduce human-wildlife conflicts, I have found in my experience as a counselor is people do panic when a raccoon is in their attic. I was certainly startled when one actually found its way into my attic. And a lot of people, I would say, sometimes even have an unreasonable fear or reaction to animals, but they call a wildlife company. The wildlife company says, you want me to get rid of the raccoon? It's $2,000. I can do it today. Or if I come back next week, it's $4,500. People are paying $2,000, $3,000 for a service that should cost them a couple of $100s, if that. So I still believe we should be licensing the wildlife operators, but I want to hear, I'll be very happy if our staff report back to us that the province has taken action and has provincial-wide legislation to get rid of the bandits that are ripping off people when they come into the house and they size them up and they go, oh, this woman's 86 years old and is afraid of the snake, that's worth $2,500. I think those people are very unethical. They do a disservice to everybody, and we need to deal with them. Finally, I think the third motion is the one in the staff report asking that, I guess it's probably the planning staff, develop guidelines for residential and commercial development processes that promote wildlife proofing measures, and other things to reduce post-construction conflicts between wildlife and residents. So, Mr. Chair, in the time that I have left, certainly I agree with what Councillor Mammoliti said. I think in terms of rats and mice, I don't know, and I love all animals, including rats and mice, but they don't belong in my backyard. They don't belong in my shed. They don't belong in my garage. They certainly don't belong in my house. And I have learned over the years that one of the reasons my property had mice was because I was feeding them with all my bird feeders. And there's ways to eliminate that. The best way to eliminate rats and mice is to get rid of the source of the problem, which is sometimes your compost pile, sometimes your bird feeders. Sometimes it's the fact that you have a nice big pile of rocks that you've gathered over the years from your lawn when you're cutting your grass, and you've made a rat condo in the back corner of your house. You've got piles and piles of rocks that heat up during the day and keep the mice and the rats really warm at night. So you literally created not a kitty condo, but a rat or mouse condo in your own backyard. And if you get rid of that rat condo, you get rid of the rats as well, or at least minimize the problem. We may never get rid of mice and rats, but at least we can minimize them. And I have been out, like Councillor Mammoliti, with licensing staff in my ward, and our staff do track down where they live often. We find out 2 doors over, somebody's got a junkyard, and you can sometimes solve the problem that way. Or a restaurant that's keeping all their organic stuff stinking out in the back lot just down the street, and that's the source of the problem. So I think prevention is better than cure, and I think for all of these issues, we can help people and wildlife minimize conflicts. I know my colleagues are skeptical of the new green bins. I think when the new green bins come out, I think that's probably the #1 conflict in the city, is that we put out buffets for raccoons on my street every Friday. On every Thursday night, actually, most of my neighbors put out their green bins. We put them out, and the raccoons come and they knock over every single green bin down the street, and they get picky. If my lasagna's not that good, they go to the next guy's house and get some shepherd's pie. So the raccoons are very smart. Hopefully, once we eliminate their source of food, they may move on and there may be less conflict. But now I keep my green bin in my shed and I don't have any problems anymore. And that's why we need to support people like the Wildlife Centre, who are nonprofit organizations that do this out of passion and can actually talk people through things, because most people, like my neighbors, when you say to them, you know, if the raccoons knock down your green bin 10 days in a row like it did at my house, maybe it's time to remove that green bin into the shed or into your garage, and the raccoons will go away, just like they did in mine. They gave me a few trills of disappointment when there was no green bin lasagna for them, but they eventually went away. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor De Vermeer. Any other speaker? If not, I have just one quick motion that I'd like to move. That the Executive Director of Municipal Licensing Standards be requested to report to the Licensing Standards Committee on the feasibility of implementing bylaw amendments to prohibit the feeding of pigeons in public spaces in Toronto.
On the point of order,
Yep.
I'm not the chair, but this was ruled out of order a number of times over the years when I've attempted to do it, because apparently the pigeons are protected by the war veterans, and it might become a real issue if you're trying to get rid of people feeding pigeons.
I'm asking for a report, Councilor Molina.
I'm just warning
I'll
you.
speak to that. No, I understand that.
I'm just warning you.
The veterans?
Okay.
It's pretty much in order. I did check with city staff.
right.
Okay.
I did check with city staff on this.
The pigeon lobby is vicious. Vicious. Make the taxi guy
Okay,
look like...
we have 4 motions, my friends, and we can have those motions on screen.
I think we can take them
Now,
as a package, Mr. Chair.
yeah, I don't mind we can take them as a package. Members of the committee, are we okay with that? To take them all? Okay. All those in favor? Against? Carry. Thank you. Fantastic.
Parking lots.
So we'll move to the last item, and we have a presentation from city staff, and that's item number 4 on the commercial parking lots and private parking enforcement agencies.
I'll defer to you, Mr. Chair, if you feel the presentation would be helpful. It's totally up to the committee's decision if you'd like it or not.
Members of the committee, are we okay with that? Yes. I think I went through it. It's an excellent presentation, and I would like to thank you for that. So we have any questions to staff on this item? Speakers as well? Questions to staff? Councilman Molina.
Yeah, I just want to, we have a huge issue with strip plazas and parking in I think, the north end of the city anyway. And they're commercial, that's categorized as commercial property, right? Most of them. And I'm wondering whether or not these definitions you're bringing forward here include those private lots.
So through you, Mr. Chair, this deals with the licensing of commercial parking lot operators. If one of those strip plazas wanted to choose to charge for parking, then they would require a commercial parking lot operator license. That's subject to the appropriate zoning being in place, and then us licensing them. That would then enable them to undertake the private invoicing or option of a commercial parking lot operator. In the absence of that, the strip malls would use the private parking enforcement agencies, which are the MLEOs, to issue City of Toronto parking tags. So I gave you a bit of a long answer for both pieces.
What does this do, though, to those plazas that do choose to enforce through collecting money?
So for those, they would require a commercial parking lot operator license, and then they would fall under this regulation, which would require them to post all appropriate signage, advising the public very clearly of the conditions under which they were parking, and a number of other regulations we've put into this article to deal with the proper operation of a commercial parking lot.
So I guess it's hard enough to get these strip plazas who are all condos, are all separately owned, sorry, with, in some cases, 15 or 20 different owners owning the different addresses in those plazas. Doesn't this just further complicate if they want to try to find a solution on the parking on their properties? This may discourage those 20 owners even more from investing in a proper system that would control it.
So one of them, or the property owner or owners in their totality, could choose to operate as a commercial parking lot operator, or they could contract with a commercial parking lot operator. They would then be subject to this regulation, the licensing, and all the signage rules.
Even under contracting.
Yes, they could, those individual property owners could contract with a commercial parking lot operator to operate the parking lot as such.
Right, but they'd be categorized, which means they would need a license.
In order for them to demand compensation in lieu of for parking, they require to be licensed as a commercial parking lot operator.
So only in the way of collecting money, like the pay machines?
Pay machines or the issuance of a private invoice. So this was a decision, if I can beg a few moments of Councillor Mamalides' time, this might help. There was a decision rendered in the courts in respect to ImPark, which recognized a commercial parking lot operator's right to collect funds owed to them in lieu of the provision of parking services where payment had not been made. So these regulations for the commercial parking lot operators now enable them to collect payment in that form, because it's deemed a contractual relationship, versus what they were required to do prior to the court decision, which was issue City of Toronto parking tags.
Okay.
So this actually enables it for the
Okay, I
commercial
get it.
parking lot operator.
All right, you've answered that question. Now, let me ask you about other questions that you may be asked later after it's done. When the CNE is open, or any big venues that are in neighborhoods that have private homes, some of those homeowners actually rent out their driveways to people that might be going to those venues. They would have to apply for a license if they chose to continue that practice under this bylaw.
That's correct. Anyone who offers parking other than a weekly, monthly, or yearly basis to an individual would be considered a commercial parking lot operator. They'd first be subject to the applicable zoning being in place, and then would require a license, and that applies to both temporary and permanent parking lot operations.
So if we had the Pope up again in Downsview, and we had 10 or 15 or 20,000 extra cars that couldn't park on the venue, and those homeowners chose to make a small profit, I guess, they'd have to get a license to do that.
That would, in order to comply, yes, they would.
And
If the zoning permitted it, and if we received complaints in respect to that operation.
Are you going to send a notice out to areas like, I'm not sure what ward it is around the CNE, because it happens a lot there. Are you going to be sending a notice to them, letting them know that they should apply for a license before they rent out their driveway?
So certainly, that would be difficult for us to identify on an address-by-address basis who is undertaking that type of work. I can share, however, and there was an article in the media last week speaking about people offering their parking lots, their driveways, I should say, for rental. So it is an issue that we're going to be looking at, determining what, if any, I think we need to do, and then we'll figure out how we advise people of their requirement for licensing after that.
Right, because enforcement comes into play
Correct.
on private property.
Yes, sir.
And you don't have the right to be on private property in any way unless you have a warrant of some kind.
Well, no, in respect to licenses that are operating that ought to be licensed, we have the right to inspect. But it does get, to your point, when you're talking about people's residential properties, we would need to be mindful of the activities we were undertaking there.
You would literally have to have somebody there witnessing the transactions.
Yeah, I've not turned my mind to what the enforcement mechanism needs to be, but generally, that's part of it, absolutely.
Thank you, Councilor Mamalides. I've been
just
very generous there with
all right.
2 additional months. Councilor Di Giorgio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a very quick question because I'm having trouble reconciling this with the permitted parking on apartment properties. Like if a landlord that has excess parking in a rental building, is he allowed to do this kind of stuff?
So I would suggest, if you have exact addresses, Councillor DeGiorgio, it would be helpful for us to review those. Certainly, the zoning permissions that are in place for that property would have to be looked at, and then understand what it is exactly they are doing to determine whether it's permitted or not, and whether it be operating as a commercial parking lot or not. This was not intended to capture those who, as I mentioned earlier, offer a space on a weekly, monthly, or yearly basis, where, you know, maybe an individual condo owner does not own a vehicle, but chooses to rent that space. This does not apply to them. So we'd have a case-by-case basis, look at what the conditions are and what's happening to determine.
All right, well, we'll do it offline because I'm not quite sure.
Let's go around, and then we'll have second round.
Just in terms of hospitals, does this now force those hospitals to go out and get a license?
So through you, Mr. Chair, we actually did speak about the conditions with hospitals such as Sunnybrook, who employs in-house security for the purpose of enforcing their parking lot. So yes, they do get licensed as a commercial parking lot operator, and then they have the option to use a private parking agency to enforce their parking or their own in-house security. They currently require a license. Under this, they would no longer, as they are solely in-house. So it's beneficial to the hospitals, at least in that regard.
But they're charging for parking.
Correct. So they would require a commercial parking lot operator's license.
And let's just say, I mean, I work out at the Columbus Center in the morning, if you ever want to know where I am in the morning. I don't do a very good job of it, as you see, but I try. They just installed machines there to collect money. They now have to apply, and they're a charity, like the Columbus Center runs as a charity. They have to apply for a license?
If they are operating parking services in return for compensation, then they are a commercial parking lot. So certainly, if you want to give us the address, we can have a look at.
I think I'm going to move a motion, actually, that limits it. I'm not comfortable going after charities, so, and I think you're probably going to get a huge amount of charities coming out and saying, don't include us. So I may as well move some kind of motion that stops that now, right?
Excuse me, sir.
So through you, Mr. Chair, Councillor Mamleet, on page 9, we have referenced a number of places where license requirement would not apply. And we have referenced parking lots governed under other city bylaws, agencies, boards, commissions, and divisions. It would not apply. The resident or tenant parking spot I've mentioned, and parking lots that offer free parking. So if there was an ask to consider exempting another organization, it would be in line with what we've provided there.
Okay,
And we can help you with
Mr. Chairman,
that.
I'm going to move nonprofits and charities not be, or be exempt from this bylaw.
Okay, Councilor, you can do that when you speak. Any other questions to staff? Okay, one quick question and to the Executive Director of Municipal Licensing, and you did mention that there is a new app that's promoting, I believe that's on the Airbnb, that they're promoting and private parking space throughout the city through that new app. What kind of arrangements are being made in terms of being proactive, or are you going to be just acting on complaint basis if there is any complaints on that?
So to you, Mr. Chair, this development of an app was relative. We suspected it was coming. We heard anecdotally it was coming. I've noted in a media article from last week. They're talking about, and it's not Airbnb, they're talking about an app called Rover Parking. There's also one which is not currently in operation yet. There's another one called Where I Park, and another one, Honk Mobile, that I've actually had to look at online. We've not had any specific complaints to my knowledge in respect to this as yet. They all do something a little bit different in different ways, so we'd have to understand what it is they're doing to then determine what the appropriate action would be for us. And we don't have that at this point.
Thank you. In terms of signature events that we have throughout the city, and this is a follow-up question to Councilman Moliris, and given that we have the Pan Am and the Parapan games around the corner, I'm sure that there is going to be all kinds of parking pressures all throughout. What kind of mechanisms do you have in place and to enforce the bylaws, or is there any flexibility that's going to be exercised throughout the...
So to you, Mr. Chair, currently we operate very much on a complaint basis. So we would have to, we just don't have the staff to do proactive patrols of this type of activity. So we'd have to understand what the issue is, where it is, in what context, before we understood what action we would need to take. I don't know how else to answer other than that.
If there was anyone who would like to adhere to the bylaws or regulations that we have, and we are dealing with a private parking area, what would be the cost or the process of applying for a temporary?
So to you, it would be an application to our licensing and permit issuance office at 850 Coxwell Avenue. One of the first things that needs to be done with a parking lot is a zoning review to determine whether or not it can be permitted in that area. And then it would be the issue, and all other documentation we require of licensees, including personal identification, criminal background checks, all that would be required, and then the issuance of the license, as long, even for temporary.
What's the cost of the application?
$392 for a new and $264 on renewal.
Thank you. If what would be the fine if there is no application?
So we proceed with no license charges either through a Part 1 ticket with a set fine, which I don't have in front of me, or a Part 3 summons, which compels the individual to go to court. Then they're subject to the fines as per the Provincial Offences Act, which could go up to $5,000. And unless it's a corporation, it could go higher.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, we'll go to speakers. Any speakers on the item?
I'm going to move motion, Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Moliri.
Move two motions. The first one is that nonprofit and charities be exempt. The clerk is writing them up right now. And the second one is that we hold off on the part of the homeowner renting their driveways out. And I'd ask that a separate report come forward through this motion that deals with some of the obstacles that might exist for those homeowners. I can tell you, the minute a homeowner wants to comply with this new parking regulation, they're going to be told that they need a zoning change because they need to change themselves to a commercial status. At that point, it'll flag a whole slew of debate in the community as to whether or not they should change to that and conform to commercial. And I think most of us have seen what happens when a dentist or a doctor or a hairstylist move in to a community and start doing things in a legal way. It becomes a huge issue at council. So let's iron those out first before we decide to move a bylaw that's just going to infuriate residents in a neighborhood. Let's find out what those obstacles might be first. And that's the logic to hold that part of it up, because I know what's going to happen. With the Pan Am Games, it's going to be a huge issue, and residents are going to want to say whether or not their homes next door should be commercial or not. That, in effect, in many ways, is changing the zoning with just a mere change of bylaw, which is a change of use for those driveways. So that's the logic, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions to the mover? If not, any other speakers on the item? Okay, so we have a motion from Councilor Malidi.
Does the clerk have it ready?
Okay, so in the meantime, as with the indulgence of the committee, I'm going to ask if we can reopen item number 3, inadvertently that we escaped one move, and that's to, I'll get to it, is we need to reopen item number 3.
Why?
Is we have there were a number of motions, but the item was not adopted as amended, so the item has to be, so to reopen the item, all those in favor? Against? Now to adopt the item as amended, all those in favor? Against? Carry. Great. So we'll go back to item number 4. Councilor Madro, yes, please.
May I ask, I know this is not a typical part of our procedural bylaw, but given the fact that Councillor Mammoliti wishes to dramatically change, what the recommendation's intent are, and kind of hold different items separately from it, may I ask one question of staff, simply just to let us know, just to inform us before we vote, what are the consequences of supporting Mammoliti's motion?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, please go ahead.
Sorry, on a point of order, that's completely out of the realm with respect to how committees work. I've never heard a motion or a suggestion that staff tell us all what the ramifications are for a Mammoliti motion. It singles out a member of committee, and I think that I have rights as a committee member. Is that the precedent that you want? We're going to start saying that if Councilor DeGiorgio starts moving motions, that staff have to respond and say what the ramifications of those motions are? It's not a general suggestion. It's pointed to one member.
Councilor Mammoliti, every member of council has a right to ask questions, to be informed, well informed before any decisions are being made. The question of Councilor Madlo in terms of any implications with regards to your motion is in order, and I'm allowing that one to.
So we can refer these suggestions to each member and not keep it general. I would suggest that any motions that come forward be treated that way, and not just Mammoliti's motions.
We have done that in the past, Councilor Mammoliti.
So we have singled out members in the past?
The members of the audience, please, we are in a committee. Please, you are not at this point allowed to disrupt.
But he's right. It does stop me from representing my community.
Okay, my
If you're
ruling
going to
is that
single out my name
the
to
motion is in
associate-
order from Councilor Madlo. And Councilor Madlo, you are allowed to ask a question.
Thank you. And
Point of order.
I probably missed the exchange, and I apologize. However, did Councilor Matlow refer to Councilor Mammoliti specifically?
Yes. Mammoliti's motions, he said.
I find that, Chair, to be very disrespectful. I find that...
That's not,
What it does, though.
that's not the point of
finish.
order,
Let me finish.
Councilor.
Chair,
Keep
Is
it general.
that,
Chair, you have to respect as well as protect the rights of all of us in this chamber. And for a particular council to single out another councilor, I think that is not warranted, I don't think that is called for, and I don't think that is appropriate. So therefore, Chair, I humbly put it to you that Councilor Matlow might want to refer to say, to this motion, not specifically.
Councilor Karygiannis, your point of order is out of order. Your point does not reflect an error in procedure or a breach of the rules. Councilor Malo was very specific. He wanted clarification from staff in terms of what's before us, and that's in order. Excuse me, sir, if you,
gonna challenge
once
the
again, you
chair.
are interrupting this.
I need to challenge the chair, so it's on record. We can start naming people and challenging them based on what their names are.
The chair has been challenged. Now, there is no debate on the challenge.
Mamalides'
Is the ruling of the chair upheld?
General motion.
There is no discussions on it. Is the ruling of the chair upheld? All those in favor? Against? Okay. Councilor Malo?
I just don't get it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to clarify, I would do this no matter who moved the motion. What I just want to understand is what, through you, Mr. Chair, to staff, what are there consequences that we should be aware of as you undertake to do this work that if we support, and I only refer to the councillor by name simply just to identify the motion, if we support the motion in front of us? Or is it benign, or is it helpful? I mean, I just don't know.
So through you, Mr. Chair, so I can share that we have approximately 429 commercial parking lots currently licensed in the city. I can't provide a number of how many of those belong to hospitals, not-for-profits, or charitable organizations. So any of those that are no longer required a license, there's the exemption there and the financial impact to licensing revenues accordingly. You know, they would be then falling outside of the regime of the commercial parking lot operator regulation. But I would also note that we've made provisions for example, hospitals with in-house security to be exempted from the PP, the Private Parking Enforcement Agency license, because they are overseen by the Toronto Police Parking Enforcement. So it's difficult to quantify what an impact would be. Certainly, I would expect that any of these organizations would still post proper signage. If at any time that has become an issue and unlawful ticketing is going on, then we can certainly bring that back and revisit it. Absent that, I can't quantify any specific or notable impact that comes to mind.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is Councilor Mamalidi?
There was a little bit of, thank you for that. I guess there are no issues with my motion after all. But on a point of order, there was a second motion that I wanted to introduce. And it's not ready, and perhaps Councillor Matlow should see that before we vote on it as well and ask the same question. Maybe he'll be happy when he goes home.
Is that the one that you referred to?
It's the one that says hold off on the private driveways until we know what the obstacles are and zonings, and not turn every driveway in a community into a commercial setting.
I will allow that for the simple reason that you spoke to it and you introduced that one.
I did.
If you were to introduce at this moment, that would be out of order.
No, it was the same one. The clerk's just typing it up now. And I wanted to give Councillor Matlow a chance to ask questions on it, seeing that it's my motion.
Any other speakers in the meantime? Councillor Di Giorgio.
Yeah, it's with respect to the second motion. I think the second motion put forward by Councillor Mamalidi was to ask for a report on the use of residential properties for parking purposes where an individual property owner might be charging for the use of their parking space on a residential property. Important to keep in mind that parking of 1 or 2 parking spaces is permitted on a residential property. And if the residential property owner, who may not actually be using the parking space himself, decides to rent it out, I'm not sure he needs to rezone the property to allow him to use the parking space as permitted under the zoning bylaw. So I think that's a legal issue that needs to be perhaps ironed out in his report, but I don't personally believe that if someone were to, on a periodic basis, allow the parking space on their property to be used by someone else is a contravention of the bylaw, personally. But it'll be interesting to see.
Thank you, Councilor DeGiorgio. Any other speakers? Do we have a motion, please? Okay, then if we can have the motions displayed, please. The motion from Councilor Mamolini. Yeah.
The only, with all due respect, Mr. Chairman, the only thing I want to make sure of is that we're not passing any bylaw until this report comes back. Because what this report's going to indicate when it comes back is there are zoning issues, that you have to have public statute meetings, the neighbors have to be told about the new commercial driveways, and that's going to be an issue. So please, let's not pass a bylaw. This is meant to just have a separate report until a bylaw is passed on private driveways. Residential driveways, I should mean.
You'd like to have the opinion of the legal department? And from legal counsel, please? Can you
Should read residential, residential driveways, not private. It should read residential, not private.
So there is a change to the motion there. And once again, members of council, please, before we speak, have your motions, your recommendations ready and handed over to the clerk, so we don't have to go through this. Is that the intention and the purpose of your motion?
Let's just need clarification that we're not passing a bylaw with this, that we're holding off until we know the information.
So this is to report back on the impacts.
Prior to enactment.
Okay, great. It's, with the indulgence of the committee, we need to make one other amendment, and that's by the request of the Executive Director of Municipal Licensing and the Legal Department as well. And the changes so the more, okay, so that the bylaw be amended to provide that hospitals, non-for-profit and charitable organizations are exempted from the requirements to obtain a commercial parking lot. Any questions on that? If not, we have those motions before us. So we had two motions from Councilor Mamolini.
Recorded votes on both.
And recorded vote on both of those. Is Councilor Malo to speak? Please go ahead.
Earlier in this meeting, we had a discussion regarding the wildlife issue. Councillor de Bearmaker had a couple of motions that he had drafted. Councillor de Bearmaker went forth to not only speak with deputants and to understand what exactly they were requesting and understand the intent of their requests.
Is he speaking on the issue or something else?
He speak on the issue. Thank you.
But also went to the members here along with the chair and helped us understand what his intent was, what the motions would do, and together we, quietly and I think very well, approved motions that were contributions to the debate, to the issue. In this case, we have quite the reverse. We have suggestions, motions that have come out of come from councillors at the 11th hour that have dramatic changes on the recommendations that have been put before us. There has been very little discussion as to the merit of these requests, exactly what the consequences will be if we approve them. I don't think that that lends to an informed or wise or helpful public policy discussion. And it's not the way that we should be having meetings, and it's not the way that we should be running our city. So for that very reason, I'm going to be voting against Councillor Mammoliti's motions.
Thank you. Any other speakers? If not, we have two motions before us, and a recorded vote has been asked. On the first motion, we can have it displayed, please. Councilor Mammoliti. Yeah, I just requested that. So that's the first motion. All those in favor? You want that to be split?
Yes, this is precedent setting.
No, it's, no, that's not the intention of the mover, so we'll vote it as is.
I have a,
Councilor Di Giorgio, is your intention to have this motion split? Is that your intention? Okay, so that's from hospitals, and the other part is non-for-profit and charitable.
So three separate votes?
Is,
Hospitals, nonprofits, and charitable organizations?
no, they should be separate.
yeah, so I'm going to allow that, that's in order, to have, to split that apart.
Non-profit and charitable?
So we are going to, your intention, Councilor Di Giorgio, is to vote on the first part to provide just hospitals, that's one part, and the second part, non-for-profit and charitable. Okay. So we are splitting that motion. The first part, are we ready with the first part? Yeah. Yeah. The first part is that the bylaw be amended to provide that hospitals are exempted from the requirements to obtain a commercial parking lot to operate a license. All those in favor?
Chair, I would move that we take a 5-minute break just to clarify this.
There is a request for a
I think it would be helpful too.
for a 5-minute recess. So we recess in 5 minutes, 5 to 12. Thank you.
Thank you.
We are reconvening. Okay. I believe that we have clarification on the intent and the purpose of the motion from Councilor Mamuliri. That's on the first one. If I'm going to ask the clerk, please, to display the motion. Point of order,
On
Councilor.
a point of order, I'm amending the first motion. So it's just charitable organizations.
They are charitable organizations.
Yeah, hospitals are charity, so, yeah. So, yes, they are. So charitable organizations. Okay, the rest is removed.
Okay, so the motion is before us.
And then I have split the second motion to clarify the intent and to be more specific in terms of what it means.
Councilor Duramin, can you?
I think it was fine leaving hospitals there because our legal staff have said they can and cannot be charitable groups, the hospitals. So let's we want hospitals, let's just put hospitals in and charitable
Vote
groups.
against hospitals.
Yeah, no, just leave it alone. It's going to lose anyway. Frank's going to vote against the hospital.
At this point we have Councilor Campbell that has a question.
Questions of
Councilor Campbell.
staff, actually. Questions of staff in regard to the financial implications of exempting hospitals and charities from having a commercial licenses. Can we put the hospital one up, please? Not this one, the other. Oh, this is, no, can we put the second one up?
Point of order. Are we back on questions of staff?
Councilor Campbell has requested that.
sorry, it's a-
Then you got to reopen
has-
it. You got to take a vote for that. You can't just let them come in and say, I have questions of staff.
Okay, Councilor.
Or maybe it's because
Maker
it's Councillor Mamlides' motion that
Okay.
this is being done. Yeah.
I'm moving that Councilor Campbell be allowed to ask questions at this point. All those in favor? Against?
Thank you.
Councilor Campbell, please go ahead.
So could we just get that, the Councillor Mamalides, or the hospital and charitable one up? Thank you. I just would like to know now it's just charitable. Oh, sorry. So how many hospitals, do we know how many hospitals are funded by the Ministry of Health and the LHINs? And how many hospitals are there in Toronto that have how many hospitals in Toronto have commercial parking lot licenses? And what are the financial implications, if any, if they were exempt?
So through you, Mr. Chair, Councillor Campbell, I did reference that earlier. We know we have 429 commercial parking lots currently licensed. I do not have the number of how many of those relate to hospitals or charitable organizations. I've come to understand some hospitals do have a license, some do not. But the impact would be $268 times the number of those that are exempted.
So really, this is not of any financial consequence whatsoever?
I would suggest it's not of any financial
It's
consequence.
just saving a little bit of red tape then?
Yeah, it's just, preventing them from needing to get the license. for commercial
That's
parking.
fine. I don't have any further questions, and thank you for entertaining my question.
Thank you, pleasure. Okay, so we have the first motion before us.
Recorded vote.
Recorded vote. All those in favor? Against? And in favor, Councilor Di Giorgio, Councilor Di Vermaker, Councilor Mamoliri, and Councilor Karigiannis. Against, Councilor Marlon Palacio. Second motion. We have another motion, I believe. Number 2. And Councilor Di Giorgio did you ask for this one to be divided as well? Okay, so we're okay on that one.
Yeah, it settles the problem.
Do you want a recorded vote on this one as well? Okay, all those in favor? Against? In favor, Councilor Di Giorgio, Di Veramaker, Palacio, Karigiannis, Mamoliri. Against, Councilor Marlowe. In terms of the disposition of these ones, first to adopt the staff recommendations and also move the item as amended.
You also have a motion? Did you not have a motion?
No, I'm not moving that. No. Yeah, adopted as amended. All those in favor? Against? Carry.
On a point of privilege, Mr. Chairman? I have two of them, actually, and I'm doing this because I want it on the record. There were two instances today that I felt that my privilege as a member were broken. The latest was when we broke to satisfy and deal with staff offline, so to speak, which we do regularly, to deal with motions. The clerk came up to both myself and Councillor Karygiannis and tried to stop us from speaking to staff. I don't understand why, but when we are dealing with solving motions and the difficulties with motions, we are often asked to deal with staff offline. So in other words, don't do it at the table here. And that's exactly what we were doing. So I feel my privilege as a member was questioned and broken. If we're not allowed to talk to staff outside of this chamber while we're in session, then I need to know that right now.
Councilor Malidi, your point of privilege, that's not a point of privilege. Your point does not affect the privilege of the Assembly as a whole, the committee, or your rights as a member of council. Now, visiting members of council under Chapter 27, Section 17H, have every right to speak to the item and also to ask questions at whatever point if this desire. I did ask the committee.
Do you understand what happened? It wasn't my point of privilege. My point of privilege was we broke, as we often do, to speak to staff offline. We broke for 5 minutes to do exactly that. And no, we broke for 5 minutes. It was actually Councillor Karygiannis' motion to do just that. We did that, and the clerk came up to us and said, we're not allowed to be talking to staff.
Councilor Mori, it is once again, I did ask from the very beginning, before members of the committee speak, please have your recommendations or your motions ready and hand over to the clerk. So it's much easier to have that information.
You're turning it around, Mr. Chairman.
So it's not a point of privilege.
So what you're saying is that we can't speak to staff outside of this table, that we cannot be speaking to staff about motions, about amendments to motions? I believe that that's exactly what he just said, that he said that my privileges have not been broken. No, that's not what she said.
Councilor Marlowe? Councilor Marlowe?
I just wanted to...
Is that a point of order or privilege?
Actually, a point of order in this case, that when a staff have been cited specifically, and in this case, there's an allegation that they have done something that a councillor has an issue with, that the staff have an opportunity to speak to it if they so wish, to clarify their perspective on it, and I believe that our clerk would like to.
Chair, on a point of order and point of clarification, when you break from a committee, I'm not sure if there's any rules, and maybe staff can tell us. If you are disengaged from the committee, the sitting, and you approach staff, and 2, 3, or 4 members approach staff to ask a question, I'm not sure if there's rules that says how many staff members can approach, how many councillors can approach a staff member. I don't think there should be any, but if there is, I'd like to know, please.
I'm going to ask the clerk to clarify that. Please go ahead.
The issue that Councillor Mammoliti was talking about was that Councillor Mammoliti and several members of the committee, while the committee was in recess, were approaching a member of staff. The fact that there was a quorum present while those questions were being asked could be interpreted as having a meeting, an illegal meeting behind closed doors. That was the reason why I advised the councillor that there was quorum present when those questions were being asked. There is a danger that if the business is being forwarded and there is quorum present, that there is in fact a meeting being taken place, and that meeting is taking place behind closed doors. That was why I submitted the advice to Councillor Mammoliti that in asking the question of staff, he should ensure that there is no quorum present in order for the meeting not to be misinterpreted as a meeting behind in-camera meeting when it was illegally constituted.
My question then of staff would be, what constitutes an advisory meeting with staff based on trying to resolve motions in the same room? It wasn't behind closed doors. And there were only myself and Councillor Karygiannis. I don't know what other members were talking to staff.
What-
There were four
What's the number? One,
I'm
two?
going to allow that
There-
question for clarification. And
There are two indicators of a meeting so far. One is that quorum is present, and in that case, quorum was present. I believe Councillor De Beermaker, Councillor Di Giorgio, Councillor Karygiannis and Councillor Mammoliti were standing there. And secondly, whether the business of the meeting is being forwarded. They are the two major indicators as to whether a meeting is taking place. All meetings must be conducted in public. If a meeting is taking place not in public, then the rules
So-
governing that under the City of
Okay.
Toronto Act
So,
must
so
be
Mr.
followed.
Chair,
Thank you. I think we are
Chairman,
going back and forth. with how
Mr. Chairman,
answer
you know
that.
what?
Is-
That means that any councillors, if you've got 4 or 5 of them and they see a staff person in the hallway, wouldn't be able to speak to that staff person at City Hall.
Well,
That's what that means.
And not the meeting.
It's ridiculous, but nevertheless.
okay. I think we are going back and forth here with the same thing.
Second point of
Okay.
privilege.
There is no,
I have a second point of
being
privilege.
explained.
I have a second point of privilege. And I'm doing it because I want it on the record. I'm going to bringing this out through my lawyer most likely shortly. We have privilege, and the chair, any chair or the speaker is obligated to protect every member's rights. You had a member earlier of which you ruled already. That member specified a name, that was mine, and that any motions that are attributed to me be reported out by staff in pointing out the difficulties. Where he broke my privilege is by mentioning my name. If he would have just said motions in general, then it would have been fine. But I believe your ruling as well breaks my privilege as a member, and I want it in the minutes.
Thank you, Councilor Mammoliti, but let me remind you.
It's in already.
Once again, is that.
It's in there.
That's not, your point of privilege not in order, is these points of privilege in order that, that you are bringing forward over and over again are points of obstruction that's not allowing to carry the functions and procedures of the committee, and I think that we should, as members of council and experienced members of council, we should act accordingly and more respectfully to each other. So having said that, can I have a motion to adjourn? All those in favor? Against? Thank you.